When Palpatine first rose to power, he didn't rely solely on brute force or immediate action. Instead, his genius lay in the way he manipulated the Jedi, turning their strengths into weaknesses and exploiting their blind spots. He recognized early on that the Jedi, despite their vast power and wisdom, were too entrenched in their dogmatic beliefs to see the broader picture. He didn't need to destroy them outright. He just needed to make them doubt themselves, and eventually, they'd destroy themselves. Palpatine's manipulation was subtle, but it was brilliant. He knew that the Jedi's greatest strength, their belief in the Force, and their commitment to peace, was also their greatest flaw. They had become rigid and inflexible, bound by their own code, and too blind to see the emotional undercurrents that affected Anakin. His approach was masterful. He never attacked the Jedi directly. Instead, he played on their weaknesses, slowly eroding their confidence and planting seeds of doubt. From the very start, Palpatine befriended Anakin, gaining his trust when the Jedi were too busy keeping their distance. While the Jedi, particularly Master Yoda, dismissed Anakin's emotions as something to be suppressed, Palpatine saw his raw emotion as a source of power. He appealed to Anakin's deepest fears and desires, his fear of loss, his longing for power to protect those he loved. Where the Jedi saw a dangerous attachment, Palpatine saw an opportunity. He knew that Anakin's attachment to Padme would be the key to his fall, and he gently pushed Anakin toward the path of the dark side by making him believe that only by embracing his emotions could he achieve true power. The Jedi Council's most critical mistake was their inflexibility and their strict adherence to tradition. They believed they had a moral high ground, and that their approach to the Force was the only path to peace. But they were blind to the reality of the galaxy's suffering. While the Republic became more corrupt and Palpatine's influence spread, the Jedi remained detached, looking at things only through the narrow lens of their rigid codes. Master Yoda, the wisest of them all, was particularly set in his ways. His belief that attachment led to suffering was not wrong, but it was incomplete. The Jedi had taken this teaching to an extreme, forbidding emotional attachment altogether. Yoda failed to recognize the human aspect of Anakin's struggle. While the Jedi preached peace and detachment, Anakin was torn between his love for Padme and his duty to the Order. The Jedi never offered him a space where his emotions could be expressed without judgment. They didn't understand his inner turmoil, dismissing his attachments as weaknesses rather than seeing them as part of his humanity. The Jedi Council's refusal to trust Anakin further deepened his alienation. They kept him out of critical decisions, undermining his sense of worth and making him feel like an outsider. They even rejected him as a member of the Council, despite his immense power, sending a clear message that he would never truly belong to them. This mistrust fostered a sense of betrayal in Anakin, one that Palpatine would later exploit. The Jedi didn't understand that Anakin needed guidance, not condemnation. Yoda, revered for his wisdom, made one of the greatest mistakes by failing to see the nuances of Anakin's character. His bias against the Chosen One was rooted in his own fears. Yoda had seen the darkness within Anakin, but he saw it as a threat, a danger to be stamped out, rather than an emotional conflict that could be resolved. Instead of guiding Anakin through his fears and desires, he simply admonished him to let go of everything he loved. Yoda's failure to empathize with Anakin's struggles was a key factor in his fall. If Yoda had made an effort to understand Anakin's emotions, instead of constantly telling him that attachment was the path to the dark side, perhaps Anakin wouldn't have felt the desperate need to seek answers elsewhere. Palpatine knew that Yoda's rigid adherence to the Jedi Code would blind him to the very thing Anakin needed: a mentor who could understand his fears, not dismiss them. Yoda's reluctance to fully embrace Anakin's potential turned his fear into a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more Yoda pushed him away, the more isolated Anakin became. The Jedi Council's biases went beyond Anakin's attachments. They were terrified of his potential and the prophecy that he was the Chosen One. Rather than embracing him and working to understand his unique position, they feared that his power might one day turn on them. This fear became a self-fulfilling prophecy, as their mistrust of Anakin pushed him toward Palpatine, who offered him the support and guidance the Jedi refused to give. Anakin's fall was not inevitable, but the Jedi's collective fear and mistrust ensured it. The Council's failure to accept Anakin as a legitimate force for good, to trust his instincts, and to nurture his potential only made him more vulnerable to Palpatine's manipulations. Instead of embracing him as the chosen one, they saw him as a ticking time bomb, waiting to explode. This fear led to their impatience with Anakin, and that impatience made him feel as though he was fighting alone. He wasn't just fighting the Sith, he was fighting the entire Jedi Order, which had abandoned him when he needed them most. Palpatine, a master manipulator, didn't simply push Anakin toward the dark side. He played the Jedi's insecurities against them. He knew that Anakin felt like an outsider, and he used this feeling of alienation to draw him in. Palpatine wasn't just offering power, he was offering something the Jedi couldn't give: understanding and a path to overcome his greatest fear. He promised Anakin the ability to save Padme, something the Jedi had told him was impossible. Yet Palpatine told him that only through the dark side could he achieve that power. This was Anakin's breaking point, his fear of loss, something the Jedi never truly addressed. What the Jedi failed to understand was that Anakin wasn't seeking power for power's sake. He was seeking a way to protect the people he loved. He wanted to save Padme, and the Jedi told him that such attachments were dangerous, without offering a solution. Palpatine, on the other hand, told him that there was no limit to what he could achieve. He planted the idea that the Jedi were holding him back, that their rigid rules would never allow him to fulfill his potential. In his desperation, Anakin turned to Palpatine, believing that he alone understood him. By the time Anakin turned to the dark side, the Jedi were already too late to stop him. The very same biases and rigid codes that had blinded them to Anakin's needs became the reasons for his ultimate betrayal. The Jedi's failure to trust and understand Anakin, their inability to accept him as he was, and their refusal to let go of their outdated dogma led him to a place where Palpatine's promises of power and freedom became irresistible. Anakin's descent into darkness was the result of years of missteps by the Jedi, compounded by Palpatine's expert manipulation. The Jedi may have believed they were serving the Force, but in truth, they were serving their own fear and dogma. And in the end, it was Palpatine, the Sith Lord they had underestimated, who turned Anakin's fear into rage and his desire for control into the power he so desperately craved. The Jedi were not the guardians of peace and justice they once claimed to be. They had become blind to the reality of the galaxy, and in doing so, they lost everything.